Good afternoon, and welcome to our broadcast. Today, we delve into a topic that consistently sparks passionate debate. Should sports teams use Native American mascots? It's a discussion that touches on deeply held beliefs about tradition, identity, and respect, and it's undoubtedly a sensitive and contentious issue for many. Joining us to explore this complex question are two distinguished guests. Dr. Alistair Finch, a historian, will argue for the potential of mascots to honor heritage under specific, respectful conditions. And Daniel Okoro, an activist and cultural commentator, who contends that such mascots are inherently problematic and often perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Our discussion will begin with opening statements from each guest, followed by 2 rounds of moderated debate, and will conclude with their closing remarks. We aim for a respectful and insightful discussion, framed at a B2 CEFR level to ensure clarity and depth. Let's begin.
Thank you, Isabel. The controversy surrounding Native American mascots is undeniable, and I approach this topic with a deep appreciation for its complexities. However, I firmly believe that a blanket ban is not the most constructive path forward. My position is that these mascots can, under the right circumstances, serve as a means to honor and remember Native American heritage. This requires genuine respect, active collaboration with tribal nations, and a commitment to historical accuracy in any representation. Firstly, we must acknowledge the aspect of tradition and identity. For many long-standing teams, these mascots have become interwoven with the community's history and the fans' sense of belonging, often without any conscious intent to cause offense. This connection, built over generations, is a significant factor for many people. Secondly, when properly contextualized, mascots could offer valuable educational opportunities. They could become platforms for teaching about Native American history and diverse cultures, countering erasure rather than contributing to it. Imagine a scenario where a team actively partners with a local tribe, using the mascot as a starting point for educational programs in schools or exhibits at the stadium. This could foster genuine understanding. Thirdly, it's crucial to recognize the respectful use argument. There are documented instances where some Native American groups have collaborated with sports teams. Others do not find all such representations inherently offensive, which suggests that a nuanced, rather than a monolithic, view is necessary to understand the varied perspectives within indigenous communities themselves. Therefore, the focus should be on a careful, case-by-case re-evaluation of existing mascots. This process must involve direct and meaningful consultation with the specific Native communities whose heritage is being referenced, rather than an outright elimination of all such symbols. It's about finding a path that respects heritage, educates the public, and genuinely involves Native peoples in shaping how their culture is represented.
Thank you, Isabel. And Dr. Finch, I appreciate your acknowledgement of the controversy and your points regarding intent. However, I must respectfully argue that in the context of Native American mascots, the impact, unfortunately, far outweighs the original intent. My position is that the very practice of using Native American people, their spirituality, and their cultural symbols as mascots for sports teams is inherently problematic. More often than not, it reduces diverse, living cultures to simplistic caricatures and perpetuates harmful, outdated stereotypes. Consider the imagery frequently employed: the exaggerated facial features, the decontextualized use of feathers and war paint, or rituals like the, quote, tomahawk chop. These are often stereotypical, not authentically representative of the vast diversity within Native cultures, and can easily lead to misrepresentation and, frankly, mockery. This isn't just about hurt feelings. There's a tangible psychological impact. Numerous studies and countless testimonies from Native individuals, particularly youth, highlight the negative effects these mascots can have on their self-esteem and sense of community identity. They see their heritage, their ancestors, being turned into a form of entertainment, often by people who have little understanding of their actual culture. This constant exposure to caricatured representations can be incredibly dehumanizing. Furthermore, this practice is a clear form of cultural appropriation. Sacred or culturally significant symbols, items, and practices are taken out of context, commercialized, and used for entertainment, frequently without any permission from or benefit to the indigenous peoples to whom they belong. It's a manifestation of a power imbalance that has historically allowed dominant cultures to take and use elements from marginalized cultures for their own purposes. True respect involves listening attentively to the voices of those who are being harmed by these representations. It means being willing to move away from practices that cause widespread offense and perpetuate misunderstanding, regardless of how long a tradition has been in place or how attached fans might be to a particular symbol. The conversation needs to shift from "we didn't mean to offend" to "we understand this is offensive and we will stop."
Thank you both for those comprehensive opening statements. Dr. Finch, Daniel argues quite forcefully that the impact of these mascots, particularly the perpetuation of stereotypes and the negative psychological effects, outweighs any intent of honoring tradition. How do you reconcile your idea of honoring heritage with the very real offense and harm that many Native Americans express?
That's a critical question, Isabel. The reconciliation lies in making a clear distinction between what constitutes a respectful, accurate representation and what is undeniably a caricature or stereotype. I am not defending offensive imagery. I am arguing against the erasure of any possibility of respectful representation. The solution, as I see it, is not complete erasure but genuine, authentic collaboration. If a sports team, for example, were to work directly and transparently with a specific tribal nation, using imagery and narratives that are not just approved but co-created by that nation, the dynamic changes entirely. Imagine if such a partnership also involved tangible benefits, such as revenue sharing directed towards tribal education or cultural preservation programs, or dedicated platforms to share their actual history and contemporary life. Furthermore, it's important to question whether all opposition is monolithic. Diverse opinions often exist within Native communities themselves regarding this issue.
Daniel, Dr. Finch suggests a collaborative, case-by-case approach. He posits that if a mascot is directly managed, co-created, and approved by a sovereign tribal nation for a specific team, it could be acceptable. Are there any circumstances under which you could envision such a Native American mascot being truly acceptable? Or does the commercial sports context itself render it problematic?
Isabel, I acknowledge the theoretical appeal of Dr. Finch's proposition for authentic collaboration. In an ideal world, perhaps such a partnership could exist without harm. However, I maintain a significant degree of skepticism about its practical and widespread application, especially within the highly commercialized and often superficial context of professional sports. We cannot ignore the profound power imbalance that often exists between major sports franchises and tribal nations. The history of cultural appropriation and broken treaties makes any such, quote, partnerships inherently fraught with potential for exploitation, even with the best intentions. Moreover, can the primary purpose of a sports mascot, which is fundamentally about branding, entertainment, and rallying fans, often a largely non-native audience, ever truly be to honor a culture in a deep and meaningful way? I fear that even with tribal approval, the representation risks being simplified or commodified to fit the demands of the sports entertainment industry.
So we see a clear divergence here. Dr. Finch, you believe there's a potential pathway through respectful, authentic collaboration on a case-by-case basis, where benefits can be shared and education fostered. Daniel, while acknowledging the theoretical idea, you remain deeply concerned about the inherent nature of mascots in a commercial setting, the historical power imbalances, and the persistent risk of stereotyping or commodification, even with tribal involvement. Daniel, let's turn to the argument of tradition. Many sports teams and their fans, particularly those with long histories, argue that these mascots are a significant part of their local heritage and identity. They often feel that removing them is an attack on their traditions and their community's history. how should we approach balancing this desire to preserve local traditions with the pressing need for cultural sensitivity and respect for Native perspectives?
That's a common argument, Isabel, but traditions are not static. They evolve, and they must be reevaluated when they cause demonstrable harm to a segment of the population. A tradition that relies on the caricature or misrepresentation of an entire group of people, particularly a marginalized one, is a tradition that needs to be questioned and, frankly, retired. Community identity can and should be rebuilt around new, inclusive symbols that everyone can take pride in, without causing offense or perpetuating harmful stereotypes. The tradition argument also frequently overlooks the Native perspective and their much longer, richer traditions, which are often disrespected by these very mascots. Whose tradition are we prioritizing when one group's tradition involves the misrepresentation of another's heritage? True inclusivity means making space for new traditions that don't come at the expense of others' dignity.
Dr. Finch, that leads to a critical point. If a significant number of reputable Native American organizations, tribal leaders, and individuals consistently call for the removal of these mascots, even those mascots that some might perceive as being respectful or historic, at what point does the argument for tradition or honoring become secondary to the expressed will and feelings of the people supposedly being honored or represented?
That is indeed a critical consideration, Isabel, and I agree it's a threshold that must be taken very seriously. Widespread, unified opposition from the relevant tribal leadership whose specific heritage is being referenced would absolutely necessitate a change. There's no question about that in my mind. However, the narrative around this debate is often portrayed as more monolithic than it sometimes is. Differing opinions can and do exist within various Native communities, and sometimes between different nations or even generations. This doesn't invalidate the concerns raised, but it does call for careful, direct consultation with the specific communities involved, rather than making sweeping decisions based solely on broader activism, however well-intentioned. The key is to ensure that the voices being listened to are truly representative of the tribal entities whose culture is specifically at stake in a particular mascot context. It's about genuine dialogue, not a numbers game played out in the media.
This highlights the inherent challenge in defining what constitutes significant opposition and ensuring truly representative consultation across diverse Indigenous communities. It's clear that navigating these differing perspectives requires careful consideration and a commitment to understanding the nuances involved in whose voice carries weight on specific cultural representations.
In closing, I want to reiterate my fundamental position. While discussions about intent and potential collaboration are intellectually interesting, the overwhelming reality is that Native American mascots, as they currently exist and have historically been used, rely on imagery and symbolism that is stereotypical, demeaning, and harmful to Indigenous peoples. These are not abstract harms. They affect the self-perception of Native youth, they perpetuate misunderstanding, and they contribute to an environment where Native cultures are seen as relics of the past, or as entertainment props, rather than as vibrant, living communities deserving of full respect. The voices of Native people, organizations, and tribal nations who have clearly and consistently articulated the pain and offense caused by these mascots must be prioritized. Their lived experiences and their perspectives on how their own culture is portrayed should carry the most weight in this discussion. True respect means moving beyond the practice of using human cultures, any human culture, as symbols for entertainment, especially when the group being symbolized has explicitly asked for it to stop. It's about recognizing their agency and their right to self-definition. I strongly urge sports teams, educational institutions, and communities to find new, inclusive mascots that all members of the community can genuinely support and celebrate. It is long past time to retire these symbols, not as an act of erasure, but as an act of principle, respect, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Let's choose to build a future where sports can unite us without denigrating anyone's heritage.
Thank you. As we conclude, I wish to re-emphasize that the issue of Native American mascots is profoundly complex and does not lend itself to simple black and white solutions. A blanket ban, while perhaps appearing to address the concerns, dismisses the genuine potential for positive educational representations that could be created in true and respectful partnership with Native nations. The identity of fans and the local history associated with some long-standing mascots, while certainly not paramount over concerns of harm, are nevertheless valid considerations that can, I believe, be managed sensitively and respectfully through dialogue and reform, rather than outright cancellation. My core argument has been for a focus on this dialogue, on genuine collaboration with specific tribal nations, and on diligently distinguishing respectful, accurate portrayals from harmful caricatures. This requires effort, nuance, and a willingness from all sides to engage constructively, instead of wholesale removal, which can sometimes feel like erasing a part of history, however contentious. I advocate for a path of active reform and recontextualization where appropriate and where supported by the relevant Native communities. This is about transforming potentially problematic symbols into opportunities for education and mutual respect. Let us therefore work towards fostering understanding and respectful representation where it is genuinely possible, rather than opting for solutions that might inadvertently create further division or miss opportunities for cultural appreciation built on a foundation of consent and collaboration. The goal should be mutual respect, and sometimes that can be achieved through careful, considered inclusion rather than exclusion.
Dr. Alistair Finch, Daniel Okoro, thank you both for your insightful, articulate, and passionate contributions to this very important discussion today. You've given our audience a great deal to consider. It's clear that this debate touches upon deeply held beliefs regarding tradition, cultural identity, harm, and the nature of respect in a multicultural society. We encourage our audience to continue reflecting on the diverse perspectives shared here and to engage in their own thoughtful conversations on this